everybody. Welcome to Unconfined Conversations with Ryan and Steve. I'm Ryan. Here's Steve. Undeniably, two handsome men, maybe. Anyway, here at Unconfined Conversations, we're going to get ready to start having these types of conversations that deal with incarceration, pre-incarceration, current incarceration, and post-incarceration. And what we want to do is we want to have conversations that deal with every subject that applies to these types of situations and the men and women who are experiencing incarceration in their lives. So today what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about some of our own personal experiences and how we began our experience individually and together as friends in the incarceration scene within our lives. And so, Steve, I'll turn it over to you and just tell us a little bit about who you are and how you came to be beginning your incarceration and the things that impacted you the most.
For sure. So my name is Steve Harrison. Originally, I'm from Rapid City. That is where I committed my crime, which ultimately sent me to prison, where I met this fine young gentleman over here. But before I went to incarceration, I was pretty hopeless. I was ready to give up my own life to suicide, mainly because I was feeling despair. I was feeling the guilt, the tremendous remorse for what had taken place in my life and the impact that I ultimately had on the victims that I created with my own immature decision making while running the streets of Rapid City. But I remember shortly after I was incarcerated, somebody key came into my life, and they started to share a message of hope, a message of restoration, a message of forgiveness for me, to me. And I had heard this message before, but for some reason, in this setting, it hit home. You know, it hit that place in my heart that I just knew that I need that. I need hope. I need forgiveness. I need something different than what I'm doing. Because up until this point, my decision making cost someone their life and cost lots of heartache and lots of pain. It cost just some uncertainty in my own family, some uncertainty in my future. But once I heard that message, it's like all of a sudden the lights came on. And all of a sudden I started to want to hear what others had to say, namely their wisdom, their perspective, their knowledge of what to anticipate of with life ahead of me. Not just incarceration, but in terms of time. You know, I'm 17, 18, somewhere in that range. You know, but these were older men, 30-year-olds, telling me like, hey, this is what you have to look forward to in life. You know, this isn't the end of the road. It's just the beginning. So I would say in a jail perspective, I started to pay attention to what others were saying and started to glean from their perspective and their experience that they freely shared with me.
So I think perspective is a great word. You know, being able to see clearly the path that was in front of both you and I.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you were 17, 18 years old when you started your time. I was 16 years old when I started my time. You know, I grew up with, you know, two parents and a very loving household and, you know, good neighbors and so on and so forth. But, you know, I made decisions, terrible decisions, that hurt people. And because of those decisions, I was sent to prison for a very long time, for over 2 decades. And like Steve here, you know, I encountered men who gave me a different type of perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in prison society, there is prison culture. And that prison culture does not cultivate great personal change within a human being in order to become better than what they once were.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both of us recognized that fairly early on, not necessarily because of our own eyes that had been opened, but also because it was shown to us
For sure.
by the men that were around us who had already done time, who had done time the right way, who had already experienced those things, and they, we got to give those guys a lot of credit. They looked at us as these young men starting off their time, doing a very long time, and they said, maybe amongst themselves, but certainly privately to themselves, you know what? Here's some young men. Let's show them the right way to do things. Let's help them the way that we were helped. And I think it's because of that mentorship that allowed us to have the perspective that we had, where we allowed ourselves to be open to receiving guidance, to receiving criticism, to looking at ourselves introspectively in order to elicit these great personal changes that were absolutely necessary in our lives. As the old saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And you can show somebody the blueprint on how to become a better man, how to become a better person, a better son, a better neighbor, a better employee, all those kind of things. But if they're not willing to open themselves up and receive that, nothing is ever going to change. And I think, for you and I think we saw the writing on the wall, which was, if we don't make these great personal changes within ourselves, we're going to end up like these guys over here, which was not very appealing. We saw how they were living their lives. But these other guys who had self-respect, who had self-worth, who carried themselves, who were confident in themselves, who had made these great personal changes, that really appealed, I think, to both of us.
For sure.
And because of that, we went down that same road that they had been on, that they had established these foundations of growth and of perspective that they trod upon, and then we were able to follow behind them and do that, and be able to benefit from the foundation that they laid, and then we were able to make some of those great changes within ourselves as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll forever be indebted to those people who I would say made an investment into my life. I think one of the first points of contact, inmate-wise, that I had was from another Christian brother who, just by the way he lived his life, by the boldness that he had, like that was infectious for me. Like it just made something well up in my heart and made me want to learn from this person, walk with this brother, just ask questions and just see, like, how did you do it? Because for me, I guess it was that there was an assurance or a peace in that I could come through these circumstances and not be tainted by the circumstances, as so many do when they go through incarceration.
Right. Yeah, the tainting because of circumstances is like a real thing. It could be a traumatic experience, it could be a heartbreaking experience, and it could be something that's not even in direct proportion to your physical self within the walls. It could be something that's happening back home, something that you have no control over. Whatever it is, it can become a breaking point where you just simply assimilate in order to numb yourself from the realities that are before you. Because to face those realities is a really daunting thing, and it's scary, and a lot of people don't want to do that. So instead of doing that, they assimilate into the prison culture, because then it's easy to forget about all those problems. It's easy to not look at yourself introspectively and try to make personal changes and all those kind of things, right? And, for you and I mean, we certainly had multiple examples in our early life in prison where we had a welcome to prison moment or a welcome to prison conversation with somebody where we said, man, this is it. Like this can't get any worse. Like this has to be the point where I have to start making a good decision about the trajectory of my life, right? And I know I've had those, and I know you have too. If you could talk about maybe one of those examples I think that would be great to hear.
For sure. One of the ones that I always fall back on because it was such a eye-opening experience. It wasn't violence. It wasn't the craziness that typically you see in prison. It was just this moment that I was brought to that really helped shed light on a decision that I needed to make then at the beginning of my sentence. And that was I was in maximum security prison in Sioux Falls. And in that building, they had the SHU, so segregated housing unit, and they also had ad-seg, which is administrative segregation. And typically, that place was reserved for people who had committed a certain offense inside the institution. So it's like a jail inside of a prison, if I can say it like that. But one time I was walking behind the prison, and I walked around the corner, and I seen what on the streets I would call dog kennels. These, like, I don't know, 7-foot by 12-foot cages, and they were
Like chain link fence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Surrounded by razor wire and all this other stuff. And I remember just looking at it and physically taking a step back and like thinking for a second, I'm only one step, one decision away from that. And that would be the rock bottom experience for me. And for me at the time, I just remember figuratively looking 20 years into the future. And although the door was small and way off in the distance, I determined then and there that I'm going to head towards that door and not look back. It just, I guess that feeling of there's really not much more the system, the state, or penalty-wise that they can do to me.
Yeah.
So I was forced to change.
Yeah, forced to change in lieu of not changing and then being subjected to that type of life, right?
Agreed.
Where you're getting the opportunity to be in a dog cage.
Yeah.
There's a phrase or a term that we use for guys that are in the SHU or an ad-seg, and that's 23 and 1, right? 23 hours out of the day, you're in lockdown, you're in your cell, you can't get out, all those kind of things. 1 hour a day, you get out to go use the shower, to go into the dog cage and walk laps, do calisthenics, whatever it is. It's a very dehumanizing thing to experience, which, by the way, I was never in AdSeg. I towed the line a few times, but I was never quite bad enough to get into AdSeg.
There's levels of badness. Apparently.
There's levels of badness, right? But I'm with you, though. Seeing examples of people who trod this other type of path and the type of life that they lived was impactful on me, too. I think for me, I saw guys who had been in for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And, to be perfectly honest, and I know you've, met some of these gentlemen as well, a lot of them are just bitter. They're unhappy. They're angry all the time at the administration, at their families, at the prison, at government, at just everything. It's hard to have conversations with them. And I remember seeing those guys. I'm like, man, I hope I never turned into that. I hope I never become that guy where like people don't want to talk to me. I hope I never become that guy that's so bitter that I can never find happiness like in my life. And I think through the experiences that I had and the people that I aligned myself with, and you as well, your experiences, the people that you aligned yourself with, I think both of us, along with others too, began to have a purpose-driven life, to steal the name of a very famous book. But to have a purpose-driven life where you can wake up every day and not be angry that you're in prison. To be able to say, you know what, today I'm privileged to wake up and go have some breakfast, go to my job, be productive, spend time with my friends, all these kind of things. And being able to do that only comes from perspective.
Mm-hmm.
If you allow yourself to have the perspective, like, I can be more than this environment, I can be more than what society and the prison system and even my peers have labeled me to be,
Mm-hmm.
where they say, you are this,
Mm-hmm.
you are a thief, you are a murderer, you are an arsonist, you are this, you are that. Meaning that you are currently subscribing to the acceptability of those types of behaviors. It's labeling you as a current
Mm-hmm.
definition of those terms. But that's a present term.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to become better than what we once were, we have to start using past tense terms. I was this. I was an arsonist. I was a thief. I was a murderer.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't do that, we'll only ever think of ourselves as those things for the rest of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I saw men that were like that.
Mm-hmm.
They had been fed messages their whole lives. You are this. You are this. You're never going to amount to anything. You're a loser. You're a failure. You're a terrible father. All these kind of things. And pretty soon that's all they thought of themselves
Mm-hmm.
as. But people like you and I, who learn from the examples of others,
Mm-hmm.
we became self-determined that we're not going to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be men that have self-worth, that have a passion for our lives, and we're going to be better than what we once were.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only because of perspective,
For sure.
of being able to say, this is what I was, but this is where I want to be, so now what do I need to do to get there? And you and I both, along with others, made those great personal changes because we had that perspective.
Agreed. One of the definitions I have for wisdom is this idea that, someone who is older than me would lend their experience to me to help accelerate my maturity in such a way that really helps me. And going into the system, I had men like that. I had people who invested greatly into my life. After I had gotten out, somebody, one of my dear loved ones said, "What's one thing that you learned while in there?" And I had to think about it for a second. And I said, the value of time, how important time is, what you spend your time doing, what you spend your time thinking about, what you spend your time reading, what you spend your time invested in, how productive you make your time. And one guy in particular told me this, and I've heard it repeated throughout the years, so maybe it's something that was lent to him. But he says, rather than count the days, make the days count. And that stuck with me.
I really like that.
Oh, he told me that, and
That's awesome.
it helped me. And keep in mind, this guy at that time, he was in prison, I think, like 30 years or something. And I'll never forget the day he called me down and said, "Youngster, come here." And I come down, and Steve Satter.
Oh, sure.
And I went down, and I'd been warned about this guy. Stay away from him. He's a loose cannon. Like, don't cross him, anything like that.
Right.
And that man helped accelerate this idea of how I get to spend my time, what I can focus on.
What was it that he said again?
He said, rather than count the days, make the days count.
I think that's really powerful.
That's
right?
very powerful.
It's really powerful, especially to a young man just starting his time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's giving you a perspective.
Agreed.
Right? On, hey, here's a new way to look at what's ahead of you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, I think perspective is incredibly important. I mean, obviously, like in people's free lives and normal people's lives, but even especially to men and women who are incarcerated, post-incarceration, all those kind of things. Perspective is just a huge, huge thing that it's not something that sometimes we're just born knowing. Like, we have to learn it, right? It becomes a learned thing. And we only are able to learn that by looking at good examples of of people who have had good perspective themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think going forward in our lives, I think we had a good perspective on ourselves, on our futures. And I think, the way that we are now and how we turned out, I think is a testament to that. Um, Here on Unconfined Conversations, we are, our goal is to have these conversations that have no borders and no boundaries. They don't have any sort of limitations. And just like having a good perspective on a person's life helps to change who they are and how they think of themselves, unconfined conversations can allow people to talk about things that can help them foster that perspective in their lives. So, in future episodes, as you continue to watch Unconfined Conversations and tune in, we're going to be talking about a lot of these things. We're going to be talking about how incarcerated individuals, how they negotiate incarceration with their families. We're going to be talking about PTSD. We're going to be talking about the public perspective of people who have been in prison. We're going to be talking about mental health. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. So make sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and make sure to share Unconfined Conversations with your friends and family. Spread the word, and then more people can have these unconfined conversations. So until next time, I'm Ryan, this is Steve, and we'll see you next time on Unconfined Conversations.